the meeting will please come into order. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. I'll ask the clerk now to please call the roll.
Trustee Sullivan? Here. Trustee Barrow? Here. Trustee Dodd?
Here.
Trustee Ferdman?
Here.
Trustee Kennedy?
Here.
Trustee Plunkett?
Here.
President Belinsky?
Here. So we are all here. We obviously have a quorum. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams software. I'll now ask Peter Skiles, our Director of Administrative Services, to explain some logistics to members of the public joining us tonight via the application.
Thank you, President Belinsky. So everybody tonight, it looks like, joined the meeting using the Teams client. So to unmute yourself when President Belinsky calls for public comment, all you have to do is, if you've got a touch-enabled device or a mouse with your computer, just wake up the screen and a toolbar will appear with a microphone on it, and you can use that to toggle your mute status. And just a reminder that only attendees can unmute themselves. So if you are muted, we won't be able to unmute you to help you out. So just remember that, and you'll have to unmute yourself when it's your turn for public comment. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm actually going to mute everyone right now. So everybody is muted. If you're ready to speak, please unmute yourself. But for those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under an order from Governor Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic, and all village in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the state has amended the Opens Meetings Act to permit electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the village board, and we are conducting our business tonight in compliance with the new provisions of the Open Meetings Act. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live on our local access channel 6, as well as on the internet at youtube.com/user/Village of Wilmette Live. And I'll say the URL one more time. So www.youtube.com/user/Village of Wilmette/live, and there's no spaces or dashes or anything like that. Recording of this meeting will be archived on the Village's YouTube website, as we do with all of our televised public meetings. A remote meeting requires a different mechanic for public participation, so to ensure our residents, business owners, and other interested parties have the opportunity to participate in this meeting, we have solicited public comment prior to the start of the meeting via email. So if you sent an email to publiccomment@wilmette.com prior to the start of the meeting, our staff will read the email during the public comment portion of our agenda. If members of the public who are watching the broadcast would like to participate during the designated public comment period, you may also submit comments through the YouTube live chat feature, and a member of the village staff will read your comment to the village board. And for those of you who have connected to the meeting via the Microsoft Teams software or via the telephone, at the appropriate time, I'll ask people to speak up if they'd like to make a public comment. And because of the logistical difficulties of not being together in person, I'll first just ask people to identify themselves as someone who would like to address the board. I will assemble a list, and then I will call on those individuals person by person for their turn to speak. For people speaking during public comment, they will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board, just as they are during an in-person meeting. And all comments received from the public, regardless of how they are received, will be recorded into the meeting minutes as we typically do. So again, I've muted everyone, and I would remind them to please keep their connections on mute until they're ready to speak. Now, before each meeting, the village board receives a packet of agenda materials. These materials are also posted on wilmette.com on the Friday before our meeting, so that residents and other interested parties can review the very same materials that the board members receive. This week's packet contained 482 pages. So I'll move on to our next item, which is item 2, public comment. Again, an in-person meeting during public comment, individuals are allotted up to 3 minutes to address the board on an item which is not on the agenda. But this meeting is being conducted remotely, so I will ask people now who are watching on YouTube Live to submit their comments for the village staff to read. You can find the chat window to the right of the YouTube Live video window. And while they are typing, I'll ask whether any public comments were submitted in advance of the meeting.
This is Alex Artiega from the Village Manager's Office. We did receive 3 public comments prior to the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Artiega, please read those for us.
Will do. Okay, the first comment is from Ellen Goldsmith. I am a Wilmette resident as well as a certified alcohol and substance abuse counselor, and have been studying attuned to Wilmette's extremely conservative approach to allowing marijuana dispensaries in the village. I see now that you are considering an advisory referendum on the November ballot. If you are going to wait that long, knowing that even if the referendum is favorable and the board decides to allow dispensaries, they won't be able to be open and functional until at least mid-2021, you will have missed the boat by then and have cost the village many valuable tax dollars. The first dispensary in Evanston opened on January 1st. Skokie will have a huge dispensary at the corner of Skokie Boulevard and Old Orchard Road, which is being built now. Northbrook will have an equally large and prominent dispensary at the corner of Skokie Boulevard and Dundee Road. And those are just the ones I know about opening in nearby communities in the North Shore. There was a statewide advisory referendum on the ballot which showed wide acceptance of the idea of legalizing marijuana in Illinois. Governor Pritzker wasted no time in getting the law passed and implemented. The amount of state tax dollars collected in the month of January alone, with only a limited number of dispensaries open during that month, was over $10 million. Unfortunately, the pandemic slowed things down, but as Illinois reopens, we can expect to see continued robust sales and hence tax revenues from cannabis sales. There are 88,000 deaths annually in the United States from alcohol-related causes, yet there seems to be no issue about the sale of alcohol in Wilmette. Cigarette smoking is responsible for 480,000 deaths in the United States each year, yet Wilmette allows cigarette sales. In comparison to these drugs, the health risks of marijuana are minimal. What is the hesitation here in Wilmette? What are people worried about? Evanston, Skokie, and Northbrook are all getting the jump on these sales and the benefit of a new source of tax revenue for their communities, while Wilmette plugs along with public comment and an advisory referendum. The ship is sailing and Wilmette is woefully standing on the dock. Wilmette does not have a strong base of retail stores and is always looking for new revenue sources and a way to drive more spending dollars into our community. I strongly urge you to skip this useless advisory referendum and all the discussions of village board meetings and proceed with allowing cannabis dispensaries in Wilmette. Regards, Ellen Goldsmith. I will move on to the second email. This was sent by Joshua Eulish. Hi, I commend the downtown Wilmette outdoor eating expansion. I know a decision was made not to shut down streets so as not to impact curbside and delivery, which many people still need to be safe. Was it looked at to turn some of the main roads, i.e. Wilmette and Central, into one way and take half the street and parking to put up covered tents to allow for more tables and accommodate if it rains so not as to hurt restaurants if it does and they lose their customers? I know it won't be perfect, but it could be designed where all restaurants get a proportional share of the space. It could also help in the colder weather with heat lamps. Even though indoor seating is now available, many people are not comfortable with it, and if the state slips back, it will go away. So this could be a proactive way to support our local community. The other half of open street would allow for delivery and curbside to continue. Thank you for your consideration. From Joshua Eulish. And I will move on to the third and final public comment. This is from Nicole Robertson. Thursday morning, my family was enjoying breakfast at Hot Cakes outside when a landscape truck pulled up to Village Hall to service the public green space. Gas-powered leaf blowers were being used and the noise was ridiculous. Isn't this ironic that the village government who banned gas-powered leaf blowers is using gas-powered leaf blowers on the lawn? Are you going to find the company that used them on your lawn? I invite you to remove your blinders and revisit your contract with the landscaping company that you have hired. We can use an Ego brand electric leaf blower, which is very powerful and more than adequate for our oversized tree-filled corner lot. Please allow us to support and enjoy small businesses as you've encouraged residents to do Wilmette without the deafening noise of gas-powered lawn equipment. Thank you, Nicole Robinson. And that is the last of the emails that we received.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Artiega. Are there any individuals who have connected to the meeting via Microsoft Teams or via the telephone who would like to address the board? I would ask them to identify themselves now. Again, you have to unmute your line to speak. Okay, Mr. Artiega, were there any comments submitted via YouTube Live?
No, there were no comments submitted.
Okay, so we'll move on to Item 3, which is the consent agenda. As described on the agenda, items which are routine business that are not normally debated by the village board are placed on the consent agenda. Tonight, all items with the item that begin with the number 3 are on the consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of items 3.1 to 3.20. And I would just say how exciting it is that we have a bevy of land use related items on the consent agenda now that the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Historic Preservation Commission, the Plan Commission have started meeting again. So items on the consent agenda are up for approval tonight. If an item is not removed by a member of the audience and it's not removed by one of the trustees, the item will be approved and it will not be discussed. So I'll begin by asking, is there any member of the audience who'd like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If you're watching on YouTube Live, you should submit that request via the chat function now. And while those folks are typing potentially, did the staff receive any requests that were submitted in advance of the meeting?
We did not receive any requests, no.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ortega. Are there any individuals connected to the meeting via Microsoft Teams or the telephone who would like us to remove an item from the consent agenda? I would ask people to identify themselves now. And again, you'll have to unmute your line to do that.
Yes, this is Trustee Kennedy. On behalf of a couple of residents who are homeowners, and they would like to remove 3.7, and their representative is currently in the meeting, would like to discuss certain concerns with the board.
Okay, so Trustee Kennedy, are you removing it or is someone else removing it?
Well, I'm removing it on behalf of someone who's here, but I think doesn't know how to do it.
Okay, all right. So we'll have that down as you removed it.
Okay.
All right. So were there any requests via YouTube Live, Mr. Artiega?
No, there were no requests.
Okay. Are there any other items that any of the other trustees would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think that was Trustee Sullivan and Trustee Kennedy with the move and the second. Would the clerk please call the roll on the motion to adopt the consent agenda? And again, the consent agenda does not include item 3.7 because it was removed.
Trustee Sullivan. Aye. Trustee Barrow. I believe he was on mute. Aye. Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Kurzman.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett.
Aye.
President Polinsky.
Aye. So the motion carries. The consent agenda has been adopted. And for those who have connected in or are listening in, just for clarity, item 3.6, 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, and 3.11, those were all approved with the consent agenda. Item 3.7 will be discussed when the Land Use Committee does its report. So moving on, and there will be no more discussion of any of those items that I just rattled off or any of the other items on the consent agenda. So 3.6, 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, or 3.11 was yours. You're done. Moving on to the report of officers, item 4.1 is the notice of the cancellation of the village board meeting on August 11, 2020. And item 4.2 is update on affordable housing in Wilmette. Trustees might recall that a meeting, probably a month ago now, there were some questions raised about affordable housing, and I asked the staff to prepare a report for the village board on affordable housing, and this is that report, the memo, and the presentation. So I'll turn it over to, I believe, Mr. Adler.
Thank you, President Polinsky. I'm going to share the PowerPoint.
Right, and I would note that there is a much longer memo in the agenda materials for those who are interested in all of the details, but Mr. Adler is going to present this PowerPoint in the meeting.
Yes, thank you. A lot more detail in the memo. I am going to start with and go through a brief discussion of the history of affordable housing in Wilmette, then talk about the village's affordable housing plan, affordable housing in Wilmette since the adoption of the plan, and then finish up talking about the housing assistance program and Housing Our Own Wilmette. Affordable housing in Wilmette, the development of affordable housing in Wilmette really started in 1976 with Gates Manor. Gates Manor is located in the village center on Wilmette Avenue next to the depot. It contains 51 units. It's for persons 62 or older, and it is a building for very low income, those who are earning 30% or less of the median area income. In 1977, the village board established the Housing Commission, and soon after that, in '79, the Housing Assistance Program was established, which I'll talk more about later. In 84, Shoreline Place, which is across from the CTA station at 4th and Linden, was approved. That's 43 units. That allows 62 or older or persons with disabilities. Again, this is a building where the median income has to be 30% or less. 1985, the Village Green Atrium was approved by the village. These are condominiums for seniors 62 or older. There's 35 units there. Between the time period of 85 and 2005, when Mellencrot was approved, there were no affordable projects. And actually, interestingly enough, between 95, 96 and 2005, when Mellencrot was approved, there were no multifamily developments in Wilmette. Same was true between 2005 when Mellencrot was approved, and 2015 when M&R got approved. There were no multifamily developments. As this chart shows, all the affordable housing that was approved in the 70s and 80s was for persons 62 or older or with disabilities. The project that was approved for HODC at 1925 Wilmette Avenue is the first affordable project where the occupants do not have to be aged 55, 62 or older, or persons with disabilities. In 2003, the state of Illinois adopted the Affordable Housing Planning and Appeals Act. That act required non-home rule municipalities with less than 10% affordable housing to adopt an affordable housing plan. Affordable housing is defined by the state as 80% of area median income for owner-occupied units and 60% of area median income for renter-occupied units. In the act, the state basically gave communities 3 goals that they could achieve for compliance. And the first goal, make 15% of all new residential construction or redevelopment affordable. The second was raising the current level by 3%. And the last was hitting that 10% of housing stock is affordable.
Hey, excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yes.
John, can you just go back to the previous slide? Can you just clarify for me and actually just others on the phone, what are the affordable housing requirements for us as a home rule community?
Well, we could determine those. I'll give you an example. Mellencrot, that income maximum to purchase an affordable unit in Mellencrot was 100%. That's what the village determined at that time was the amount that the village felt would qualify as affordable. To have units be counted by the state towards that 10%, it's that 80% of area median income for owner-occupied units, 60% for the rental units. But again, we could decide for Wilmette what affordable means. And again, for developments such as Gates Manor, Shoreline Place, those were 30% of area median income. Those were very affordable. Cleveland Place, which I'll talk about later, at 1925, is very affordable. That's at 30% of the area median income. You know, all these projects are helping and serving a different population, but again, to meet the state's criteria, if we're trying to hit that 10% of total housing stock, it would be 80% for the owner-occupied units and 60% for the renter units. Did that answer the question?
I guess where it talks at the last bullet where it says we were provided a choice of 3 goals to accomplish to achieve these, this affordable housing plan. Do those 3 goals, I guess my question was, do those 3 goals really apply to us as a home rule community?
So John, I'm going to jump in here for a second.
Yes.
Jeff, can you speak to the Act and its application to home rule and non-home rule communities?
Yeah, So first, the Act does not apply to home rule communities. There's a legal opinion on that from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus that was issued back in 2003, 2004. There has been no rulings or any action by IDA or any other court action taken to say that that opinion is incorrect. As a home rule unit, we are essentially allowed to govern our own affairs with it as long as it is not expressly exempted within a statute or provided by a court. There is no express exemption in this statute, therefore the home rule, our home rule powers will trump anything over this act. What is interesting, though, what the village did back in 2004 and 2005 is that they adopted their own plan based upon these criteria that were set out by the state. And it's not, these three criteria are not ands, they're ors. You pick one. And the village chose to pick the 15%, submitted a plan to IDA, to the state, and in the plan it states that we are doing this not because we have to under the state act, but we are doing it because we still believe in what the goals are, and we're doing it under our home rule authority. So even if we were non-home rule, it is my opinion we're in compliance with the act. There is nothing in the act that requires any updates to the plan. If you update it, you should submit it to IDA, but we have not updated it. Even the administrative rules in this and the administrative guidance from IDA states that a village, quote unquote, may submit a plan, not has to. So those are really the two components of how we as the village of Wilmette operate. So it's kind of unique, I think, than other places.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer the question?
Yeah, that was a really helpful answer.
Great. Okay, moving on. Hold on. There we go. As Mr. Stein just stated, the village, to demonstrate its commitment to affordable housing, did adopt a plan in 2004 that followed the state laws and guidelines. We adopted the goal of making 15% of all new residential development or redevelopment consist of affordable units. Just because of the nature of the village concentrates their attention on multifamily buildings and asking developers of such buildings to include at least 15% of affordable housing units. In the plan, there was a number of ways that the village identified to meet that goal. There were sites that were identified where multifamily could be developed. Incentives for development, including the use of the plan unit development process, was discussed. And we established a 60-day wait period for the filing of an application. The wait period was to allow staff to consult with an applicant about the desire, the affordability goals, and the desires to see affordable units as part of the development. Give them time to consider that before submitting an application. If an application such as HODC's Cleveland Place at 1925 met the requirement, there was no waiting period. Now we're looking at the affordable housing units from 2004 after the affordable plan was adopted to present. It's interesting because if we look at everything that's been done, including the Optima development, and we look at the units that Community Partners for Affordable Housing, which I'll talk about briefly in a second, when you look at all those units, it's fairly close to the 15% that is our target and is our goal. And I will go into a little bit more detail on these on the next slide.
Could you go back for a moment? This is Trustee Kennedy. If I understand, I'm going to go back to a comment or a question that Trustee Dodd asked. Are the 12 affordable units in Malincrot actually affordable by the definitions of the AHPAA? I thought you said no.
No, my understanding, and I actually did, I went and looked at some of the sales prices. I think the most recent sale was probably 3 or 4 years ago. They are, I'm fairly confident that those are priced to be affordable to those who earn up to 100% of the median income. That was what the village chose to do it due at that time. I'm not positive about that, but just a quick look at what those numbers were. I think that the state would not consider those, by their definition, as affordable, and meeting that 80%. I think we're seeing I think we're seeing the 2 bedrooms in the mid 200,000s there, the 1 bedrooms in the high 100s. I think the 1 bedrooms might meet that 80%, but I don't think the 2 bedrooms would. Yeah.
So this is affordable units by our definition, not affordable units by the AHPAA definition.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact records of what those sales prices were. I'm confident that some of those units that sold are probably at 80%. I actually saw one unit that sold for $100,000 like 4 years after, when it was $190,000 to begin with. That was during the recession. So it also depends on when the unit was sold. But that's a good point, that I'm fairly confident that some of these units probably were higher than that 80%.
Okay. And my second question relates to Optima. I mean, aside from the fact that nothing has actually been built, so it seems to me if you're going to do apples to apples, then you should say that there are 123 units in Optima, 14 of which are affordable, rather than 109 units, 14 of which are affordable, because that's not really the case. Those 14 units are not on site, but the total that are proposed to be built are 123. Is that correct?
Right. I guess what the way I would look at it is, if somebody is proposing to build 100 units, and we want to see 15 affordable units, and somebody takes units which aren't currently meeting that definition of affordable, and they make them affordable, I see that as 15% of that, meeting the intent of the ordinance, which is we want to create more affordable housing throughout this village. And I think...
Well, I agree with that. No, that's not my point. My point is only in determining the percentage of affordable housing units that have been built, it seems, or are going to be built. This is speculative at this point.
Yeah.
It should be 123 total units, 14 of which are affordable, but not on site.
Right. I guess from a staff's point of view, because those units already exist, so when we're looking at, if we're looking at the total and how we're raising the number of affordable units, the fact that we're not building new units, so we're not building 123 units, 14 that are affordable. We're taking 14 non-affordable units and making them affordable. I understand what you're saying, but when you look at the total numbers, I think the percentage is going to slightly uptick in the percent of affordable housing, as if we were looking at 109, because these are existing units.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. When you look at it, because they're not in the building, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you do treat them that way, then that 14.2, if my math is correct, goes down to about 13.5 or 13.6.
Sure, and I think one of the other things which I'll touch on, and I'll mention it now, is the idea of what, if this does go forward and SEPA does come in and that housing trust model is established in the village, as we talked about, SEPA's looking to do 10 for sale units, 4 rental units. SEPA's actually also, and this gets to your point about the affordability, SEPA's actually looking to do units that would be up to 120%. So I'm actually getting to your other point. Some of these 14 units won't meet the state's definition, so to be just completely clear, we're sort of looking at from the Wilmette universe of affordability, because again, your point of there are going to be units like that are in Melanquat that won't meet that definition because they're trying to get to 80% and they're trying to get another a segment of the population which would have difficulty buying a home in Wilmette, if that makes sense.
So you don't by any chance, I know this is asking a lot of you, you don't by any chance know what percentage of these 295 would be, or of the 42 affordable units would really meet the definition under the AHPAA, do you?
You know, my guess, you know, we would take 5 off for the Optima, because I think SEPA was looking to do 5 at 120%, and which say take 4 or 5 off of the Mellencrot, so maybe 10 units. That would be at a higher rate. When Mellencrot was developed, it was the Housing Commission that helped decide what that amount should be. So I think, you know, that gets to what we'll talk about a little bit later is the housing plan and the idea of what Ida was asking communities to do is great, but we need to look at really for Wilmette specifically. There's other things that we're going to talk about. Retaining affordable housing, hugely important. The fact that we actually probably create units through the housing assistance program by giving assistance to people to lower the rent to the point where it becomes affordable, that's not represented in the numbers that Ida provides. We don't know exactly how many people are because it hasn't been calculated that way. But yeah, I would say you would probably take about 8 to 10 units off that. Some of those would be the units that would fall between 80% median income and the that higher amount. You know, the potential up to 120%. Now, looking at Cleveland Place, there are units again that go down 20-30% of median income. That's a very affordable building. So you know, those obviously are exceeding that.
John? Oh.
Go ahead, Trustee Plunkett. I think you've...
Yeah, mute and I unmute. Can you just go into a little bit more, explain where the median income number is derived? And I'm kind of interested to know, too, you know, what the median... Do we have numbers for Wilmette? Like, you know, how does Wilmette, like the median income in Wilmette compare to the median income that we're talking about?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think the number is per household probably in the 150 to 170 range. I'm not positive about that. The way that Ida looks at what is affordable, they'll look at for a 4-person household, and so to purchase a dwelling unit, the income limits, I believe, this year was $72,800, and the rent it was $54,600 were the maximums. The income limits, when you get down to 30%, are $27,300. So, and the I believe the 100% is around $91,000. So, you know, Wilmette's quite a bit on the median income is quite a bit higher than that.
And John, you were right. The median household income in Wilmette is about $155,000.
Thank you. Any other questions about this slide? Just a little bit more detail. Mellencrot, again, was the first multifamily development in the village since 1986. It was the village and the Park District helped facilitate it. As we talked about, there's a formula price that allows, I believe, a 3% increase per year on those units, and they're 1 and 2 bedrooms. The 611, 617 Green Bay Road properties, interesting because there's a lot of history on that. In 2007, the village did approve a 54-unit condominium building where 8 of the units were going to be affordable. That developer actually opened up a sales center, but because of the recession, they withdrew those plans, and through litigation, after some failed development attempts, the village acquired the property, and that's what we have right now is the 75 market rate units, and then the contribution to the HAP program, Housing Our Own Wilmette, to the tune of $80,000. Cleveland Place, again, from a staff point of view, is interesting because it is our first non-specific senior building or building for persons with disability. Even though they do have units set aside for persons with disability, you don't have to be over a certain age or be disabled to rent in Cleveland Place. And then last is Optima, which has been granted preliminary approval, and the contribution, and if this goes through, the creation of affordable housing land trust to create these units, and hopefully, as we know, there are a couple of village residents who have been on the SEPA board who want to raise funds to continue this, to try to develop one unit a year in Wilmette. This idea of the Affordable Housing Trust was discussed by the village's administration committee in 2007 as one of the real ways in which you could establish long-term affordable housing in the village. SEPA came out of the City of Highland Park's Housing Trust. Again, if Optima goes forward, we would expect to see that development go forward. We talked a little bit about the fact that the village is not meeting the 10%. In 2018, and I think they do this, they're going to be now doing this every 5 years. IDA indicated that we're at 4.5% of our units being affordable. We did lose a lot of units since 2004, but interestingly enough, since 2013, the village did increase the number of affordable units. The Housing Assistance Program, again, is something that's been around since 1979, and I'll just say, somebody who has been on a number of the home visits for this program, it's a hugely important program, and with it being privatized and Housing Our Own Wilmette being established, what, from a staff point of view, we were very excited to see is first that there's a lot of support from the community in fundraising from things like a Jeep raffle, which is currently going on now. So tickets are $100. Please buy your tickets to have a chance at winning a Jeep and supporting a great nonprofit. It currently provides assistance to 18 Wilmette residents. Since 2018,
John, Mr. Adler, let me interrupt one sec. It's also, when you renew your vehicle sticker, there's the option to contribute directly to this. So you don't have to enter a raffle. A lot of residents just click on the button and the village automatically takes care of that, right?
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that, President Belinsky. The response to that is always very, it's great. There's a significant amount of money that comes in that way. So yes, we make it really easy if you want to donate. Thanks. The increasing, adding 7 new participants, there's currently no wait list. And in 2019, the monthly assistance for those who have rent assistance was raised from $200 to $225. Earlier this year, the Housing Our Own Wilmette Board voted to provide a one-time relief in the amount of 3 months of assistance for those who rent, so $675. And so that was unexpected by those who are in the program. And when I tell you the things that the people in the program really what they felt about getting that additional assistance, they were really taken aback by it, and again, doing these home visits is really, you really understand without this money, we probably would have 14 to 18 households not able to live in Wilmette. The other thing that the village does is fund emergency housing assistance program. It's funded out of the general fund. This year we did provided assistance to 2 people who had COVID-related emergencies. Any questions about that?
John, this is Trustee Dodd. I just have these 18 Wilmette residents that we're providing assistance for to live in their homes. Are those affordable units then, or I'm just curious why we're not counting those 18 residents in our...
Sure. The state, and actually I've talked to some people who are involved in affordable housing, and there's a couple of things that I think we all agree that most affordable plans should recognize, and it's that those sorts of programs. It might be a voucher program that the state provides money that then lowers a unit in Wilmette to be affordable, or a program like Housing Our Own. The state just doesn't identify those, and I think in part because they're not necessarily aware of it. I think what we would want to do, we're going to talk about the next step in the comprehensive plan and working that into an updated plan. We're going to want to know that. We're going to want to know what programs like that are doing and how they're helping create affordable housing to get a better understanding. First, is this something we should expand, and can we, and how best to do it? And also, which I touched on a little bit earlier, it is of utmost importance to look at the affordable housing that we have. Most of the affordable housing we have is not Gates Manor or Shoreline Place or Cleveland Place or these developments which have affordable housing tax credits, so they need to be affordable. They're units owned by landlords, and they're market units, and one of the things we'll have to look at, and we think the administration committee and through the comprehensive plan and what comes out of the comprehensive plan, is are there ways that we could make sure that the affordable housing that we have remains affordable housing, or at least, a percentage of it. Give you an example, and it's mentioned in the report. We had, I think it was a development of 10 or 12 townhomes. Most of those townhomes were affordable at one point, but a developer went and fixed them up, and then the rents were raised to where, while they're not $3,000 or $4,000 a month, they would no longer be deemed affordable for somebody at that 60% median income.
John, just a quick follow-up on that. Do we know how many of those units are affordable? By any definition, we talk about the ones that are dedicated, but do we have a sense of, other units in Wilmette, and do we know if they constitute as affordable?
There's 14 rental and 4 that are property tax assistance, which is actually a lien program. But my guess would be that the 14 with the village the Housing Our Own Wilmette $225 probably are affordable at that point. Now, there are some people who also get other assistance through the township and other entities, but I'm confident that those who are getting our assistance, if the unit itself with our assistance is not affordable, the other assistance that they're getting is bringing that to an affordable level. But that's something we could look further into. We do get copies of the leases. We do get an understanding of what other assistance the individual is getting, and so we it could be relatively straightforward for us to figure that out. A lot of times we won't get new leases, so we might have to request them. But again, I'm pretty confident that the majority, if not all, are lower to the point where it would be deemed affordable by even the state's definition.
And the affordable housing that we lost, was that because of renovation and then raising the rents or raising the price? Was that the cause of the loss, or?
That would be my guess. We're not absolutely positive. We know about the ones on Ridge Road, the townhomes, because unfortunately we heard from people who were having their rent raised, and we were trying to help them figure out, what their next steps would be. So that would be my guess is, or rents just went up. It doesn't take a significant amount, of rent increase to get something from meeting the state's definition of affordable to not meeting it anymore. We have a building where we have a number of affordable units in it. That landlord did fix up those units and did put money into them, but they remained affordable. It wasn't somebody who went and, did solid, kitchens that were $20,000. He updated them to the point which made sense for the building and which was nice for those living there. But he did keep it generally affordable, which was really positive to see. Sort of the next steps, and we've been talking about the comprehensive plan. It was budgeted for 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and the ability to really hold the types of meetings that we would like to was very difficult. So the timing on this now is for staff, the Plan Commission, the Land Use Committee, and the Village Board to complete the RFP so that hopefully at the beginning of 2021 we could start with a consultant on rewriting the plan. There's a lot of things that the plan needs to do. One of the most important is to look at the housing chapter, and that's going to need to include things like, an updated assessment, identifying our goals, as we talked about. While our state, our affordable housing plan that we did in response to the state doesn't necessarily recognize the successes of a Housing Our Own Wilmette assistance program. It doesn't identify the issue we will have with the loss of the affordable housing units that are currently in place. And so those are goals and policies that we need to develop in this new plan with public input. And then, assure that it helps, us being able to update the housing plan and so that we could accomplish our goals. Again, that 15% that's not a bad goal. It's, that's great that we're looking to increase the number of units in that way, but there's other things which through the comprehensive plan and updating after that the affordable housing plan, I'm sure we're going to want to concentrate on.
Hey, John, Peter Blower here. As you know, the administration committee has begun thinking about what we may be doing with the Housing Commission. How would you anticipate that process and that commission to be engaged in the comprehensive plan revision process?
Yeah, I think the specifics we would want to develop with input from the board and the Plan Commission and the consultant we bring on board. But assuming that a housing commission has been established, a lot of times with comprehensive plan, I'll give you an example. There's a section on historic preservation. We're going to want the HPC to provide us input. There's sustainability. While it might have its own chapter, it's going to have an underlying theme throughout the plan, and we're going to need the environmental and energy commission's input, transportation commission. So I would expect that the housing commission would be asked to comment and participate in the drafting of that section. How that's done, whether it's in tandem with the Plan Commission or whether something's sent to the Housing Commission to hold, this public discussion, we don't know yet because we just haven't got to that point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I will unshare.
All right, thank you, Mr. Adler. We will move on now to the report from our village manager, Mr. Brayman.
No report, Mr. President.
Next report is from our corporation counsel, Mr. Stein.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
We'll move on to item 5, which is the report of the Liquor Control Commissioner. There's no report tonight, so we'll move on to the standing committee reports. First up is Trustee Barrow, Land Use Committee.
Thank you, President Belinsky. Item 3.7 has been removed from the consent agenda, so I move for approval. Zoning Board of Appeals report case number 2020 Z10 336 Sheridan Road regarding a request for a 2,490.32 square foot, 13.13% total floor area variation, a 4.25 foot north side yard detached garage setback variation, a 3.25 foot north side yard garage eve setback variation, a 5.22 foot accessory structure separation variation, and a 175.01 square foot, 2.06% front yard impervious surface coverage variation to permit the construction of a new detached two-car garage and a new raised deck and modification to an existing circular driveway on the legal non-conforming structures in accordance with the plan submitted, adoption of ordinance number 2020-025.
Is there a second? Second. Who was that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Trustee Dodd.
I've got an echo of me now somewhere. Okay. So, Trustee Kennedy, you asked that this be removed. Would you like to cede the floor to someone who's dialed in?
Yes, I was told that some homeowners in property adjacent to this one wanted to address the board, and that's why I asked to have it taken off the agenda. So if I can turn over the floor to Ms. Healy Rice, if she's here. I think you are. I see you in my...
Yeah, she's here. I can see her.
Great, good.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of Marilee and Rick Redmond, who are the adjacent neighbors at 34 Canterbury. And we just asked, as we submitted to you, and we have informed and had conversation with the Trzowskis also, that the report that we provided, our consultant, Bono Consulting, who's a civil engineer, had just asked that we seek an extension of the drainage to create a swale that would enable an overflow of the drainage system that the Trzowskis are proposing to not flow onto the Canterbury property. Trzowskis were in favor or supportive of that, and I just wish that would be part of the consideration for the approval of the variation. The Redmonds do not have any issue with the request in and of itself and are in favor of the removal of the existing garage and moving it up to the top of the property. It's just that the lot is severely sloped, and we're sensitive to any water issues that then flow down onto the Redmonds property.
So, Mr. Adler, I guess I'd ask you to weigh in here. Normally you're not allowed to make the water issues worse on any neighbor. Is this something that the staff is already aware of, or that engineering is aware of, with regards to this particular property?
John, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Thank you. I'm fairly confident that engineering's aware of it. I think one of the concerns when you attach conditions on single-family residential when it comes to the grading and drainage before engineering's had a chance to review. They might have changes to what Bono is proposing, and if we adopt something as a condition, that would be that would require us to come back to the board to amend that. The village engineering department is very good at listening to neighbors. In this case, it's great that we have the report by Bono, and we have, it sounds like, a willing property owner who's doing the work to abide by that. The only concern is if engineering wants changes from that because they think it will better the situation. We don't necessarily want to handcuff them, but again, I think with a willing, it's on the record that that this document's been submitted. We could ask the applicant to go back on the record about their willingness to adhere to it, and then allowing engineering to do what they do, which is to review the plan and to make sure it's going to function. I think is the direction to go in.
So I believe the applicant is on because I see his name at least, and presumably that's his face that goes along with his name. You're muted though.
Sorry, that's me. I'm Bill Truskowski. My wife Jenna and I bought 336 Sheridan Road last year and are doing a monster renovation, and I appreciate you folks actually approving it as a Wilmette landmark. It's real exciting for us to have that taking place. So I spoke with Healy earlier in the week and saw the report that Bono Engineers did. We had our own engineers, Green Guard, that performed an evaluation of the site, and the modifications that Bono asked for are minor in nature, and we're happy to go ahead and oblige if that's what the engineering department goes ahead and determines is appropriate. So I think at the end of the day, the Redmonds have been great neighbors, and they've been very patient with the noise that occurs with a rehab, and we're very appreciative of the fact that they've been understanding that we're trying to awaken the giant on Sheridan Road. And like I said, we're happy to move forward. However, the engineering department determines if they have some other solution in addition to what Bono has suggested or Green Guard, we're open to listening to it.
So, Ms. Rice, you're experienced in development in Wilmette. You know the engineering department as well. Does Mr. Adler's comments and the applicant's comments satisfy you from the point of view that it's on the record that you're going to work on any water stuff and that the village engineering team will also weigh in here?
Yes, that would be great.
Great. So, and Trustee Kennedy, that was the sole purpose for you removing it, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So is there any other discussion from any of the other board members? Okay. Well, I should ask if there's anybody in the public, at least quickly, since it's been removed. Are there any members of the public, either via YouTube chat, the Teams software, or obviously nothing was submitted in advance, or this would have been removed. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board on this matter? I'll just pause for a moment here. And Mr. Arteaga, if you would just take a look at our chat window just to make sure, I'll come to you in a moment. All right, Mr. Arteaga, anybody pounding away on the keyboard on the chat window?
No, I believe we just received an earlier chat from Peter Sung Orr. Do people have to meet an income limit to qualify for the affordable housing?
And the answer to that, I think Mr. Adler already answered in his presentation. So, okay. I guess it's been moved and seconded. I would ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Trustee Sullivan.
Aye.
Trustee Barrow.
Aye.
Trustee Dodd.
Sorry. Aye.
Trustee Kurzman.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett.
Aye.
President Belinsky.
Aye, so the motion carries. The request has been approved. We'll move back to Trustee Barrow. I think that is all you had on your docket.
That's it. All other matters are on the consent agenda.
All right, Finance Committee, Trustee Kennedy.
All items are on the consent agenda.
Trustee Dodd, Administration.
All items on consent.
Municipal Services, Trustee Sullivan.
All items are approved on consent.
Public Safety, Trustee Kurzman.
No report.
And Judiciary Committee, Trustee Plunkett.
We have a report.
Yes.
Well, I think we're going to go to
discussion.
We have a discussion. So I think we're going to start off with Mr. Stein on a discussion on the next steps for a cannabis referendum.
Yeah, let me jump in here for a moment. We talked about this last year when we passed the moratorium in advance. At that point in time, there was a suggestion of a referendum, and I know Trustee Dodd specifically suggested that we talk about it this summer. So last meeting, Mr. Stein made a presentation to us, and there's a memo as well. And so really the question in front of us, and I am going to open it up for questions to Mr. Stein, but the question in front of the board tonight is very simple. It's, does a majority of the village board favor a non-binding referendum on the ballot in November before we make a final decision on recreational cannabis? If that is the case, then we'll also need to determine the language so that the staff can bring us that language at the next meeting. We're not going to vote on whether there's a referendum tonight. And if we decide there isn't going to be a referendum, we're also not going to decide the fate of recreational cannabis tonight. If that were the case, we would schedule, a reconsideration, I guess, of the current moratorium at a future village board meeting, which we would provide a lot of notice about, so we would get the appropriate amount of public comment. So again, we're not deciding the fate of cannabis tonight. We're just deciding whether we're going to whether we want a resolution on the agenda at our next board meeting that would approve a referendum. So that's my intro. I will ask the board members now if they have any questions for Mr. Stein, either the memo or anything else related to recreational cannabis. I have one question, and this is more putting this on the record. So, Mr. Stein, according to the materials that we saw, I think it says that if you sort of geographically look around us, every community in New Trier Township has either prohibited recreational cannabis, or in the case of Northfield, they have a referendum scheduled. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. As far as Northfield Township is concerned, is exactly how it's laid out.
And then Evanston and Skokie to our south have both approved, and they have, there's a medical cannabis facility in Evanston that has gone recreational as well. And then I think every one of the members of the board has seen the large facility being built across from Old Orchard, which is really big. Somebody told me, I don't know if this is a fact or not, so I probably should say it, that it would be the largest dispensary in the state when that one is open and
I
operating.
believe that's true, actually, yes.
Okay.
I might have been the one that told you.
Okay, and then to the west, Glenview has prohibited it, and Northbrook has approved it, and they have plans for a recreational facility to open. So that's sort of, the surrounding communities, the landscape of what people have done on this topic. Did I get that correct?
You did. I think the only one that we may have left out is Deerfield, and they have allowed it, but they do not have one that's operating.
Yeah, and I was thinking just the ones surrounding us. Deerfield is a comparable community, no question. No question.
That's correct. Mike, you're muted, Mike.
Sorry. So President Belinsky, we've received a request to show all these communities on a map. So we've got our GIS team working on that, and we'll share that with the board in advance of our July 28th meeting.
Okay. Actually, it might be interesting if the sites are known for the facilities to not only sort of whatever shade them, whatever color, presumably green for the ones that have approved it. If maybe you put a little mark showing where the facilities are planned to be located.
That's the plan, yes.
Okay. All right, so any other questions for Mr. Stein? If there aren't, and I'm gonna
jump in.
Okay. Go ahead, Trustee Plunkett.
Thanks. Okay, so Mr. Stein, today you updated your memo with a couple of municipalities that are reconsidering. I think it was Arlington Heights and Oh, okay. They currently have medical marijuana facilities already?
That's correct. Both have an actual medical facility operating in their municipality for a couple of years now.
Okay. Have we heard about any other towns that had previously said no, that they're also reconsidering? So much is going on all of a sudden.
The only other town that I'm aware of is Prospect Heights, has recently said that they will consider having a dispensary in their town. Other than that, I have not seen anything. Nothing has popped up on any of my alerts on this, or no one in staff has forwarded me anything. Obviously, Chicago does have quite a few dispensaries. There is one that's controversial in the Gold Coast area. Some of the public is opposed to that, but the outcome of that hasn't really been determined yet.
Right, I believe there was an article in the Tribune or in Cranes today about that.
Correct.
So, Mr. Stein, I have a question for you. This is Trustee Dodd. So I know that when the state initially made the decision to allow recreational cannabis, they had done a referendum in front of the, or I don't know if it was the state or Cook County, that talked about whether they should legalize the sale of recreational marijuana or cannabis. And I'm just curious about, I think you shared with me the language, but that language wasn't specific to any community. It was more just broad about the entire state. Is that true?
That's correct. It's actually in Mr. Frenzer's memo that's attached to my memo from last meeting. And it is really, I mean, I can read the language. It's just, shall the state of Illinois legalize the cultivation, manufacture, distribution, testing, and sale of marijuana and marijuana products for recreational use by adults 21 and older, subject to state regulation, taxation, and local ordinance. So that is a much broader question, and it's a statewide question. And it was actually inserted by Cook County, not the state.
But that particular question was answered by Wilmette residents, and do you know the results of that particular question specific to Wilmette residents?
I do. It's in the memo if you want to give me one second.
I'm looking at the memo.
It was definitely in favor.
It was in Mr. Frenzer's memo on this.
Okay, I apologize for that.
That's okay. No, that's okay. It's hidden in there. If you want to give me one second, you can find the answer to that. It was a vote of
67-33 is what I just read.
There you go. Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's 2/3 in favor. Yep.
All right, any further questions for Mr. Stein or Mr. Brayman? All right, so again, the purpose here tonight is just to figure out whether we're going to put something on the agenda for the next meeting. And so I would suggest we just do a straw poll so I can see where people stand on this. And I will start. I am in favor of a referendum, and we can talk about the language afterwards.
I'm in favor of a referendum.
I'm in favor of a referendum as well. I would second all of that. As I walk around, certainly my neighborhood, I've heard a wide variety of opinion, and it's certainly unscientific, but it really defies categorization, and I think I would benefit greatly by getting a better sense of what Wilmette folks think. So yes, I favor that.
This is Trustee Kennedy. I haven't found many people with strong opinions, one way or the other, and I'm surprised, actually. I guess I'm not talking to the same people that Peter is. But I guess my only question is, what a referendum, which is merely advisory, does to help us answer the question of what we should do?
I think it just provides more information.
And if I can chime in, because I was asking, Mr. Stein earlier about, the difference of having a survey versus a referendum and, getting a sense of how strongly people feel about this, right? Do they feel strongly one way or another, or are they relatively ambivalent? And how do we determine that from the referendum results? And, he said, I think if you want to clarify this, like statistically, if there is an undervote, if people don't vote for that at all on the referendum, it shows really their, ambivalence on the issue. If people feel strongly one way or another, they vote yes or no. I think those three things would be interesting to know. How many people feel strongly and how many people, or I know I could go either way.
So this is Trustee Dodd. I can share. So I am, I'm not in favor, but I'm not dis in favor. I'm torn on this issue, to be honest. And I think I've spent some time talking to staff about this. For me, it's not as much about. For me, it's just very important for us to think about when we do a referendum and why we do a referendum. And I think we should always make those decisions very carefully and very thoughtfully, which I know we're doing here. But I just, I'm concerned because I believe we as elected officials are intended to have more knowledge than our residents to make the best decision on behalf of all residents. That's why we're in the positions we are, because we're going to spend the time doing the research, talking to residents and things like this. And I don't see any issue kind of black and white. Yes, I recognize that this is a moral issue and one that it's important for residents to give us a perspective. But if we think about it and we think about either the loss of sales tax revenue, if we don't do this, the loss if it comes back from the residents. I think if we ask the question to residents, even though I would feel that we would be more obliged to have to take that feedback, and probably I'd have a difficulty if we got feedback from the residents and we in favor or not in favor. I'd have a hard time not following the feedback from the residents, I guess. And yet what I struggle with is the residents, and this is not to say that people aren't smart, but they might not have all the information available to them when they're doing this referendum. So for me, I just struggle a little bit with why this is something we do a referendum on, but other things and maybe other situations where we would not.
Well, point well taken. I mean, look, we are the elected officials who make decisions. I think this one's a little easier to understand, though. I mean, yes, there's a loss of tax revenue, and that'll be out in sort of the conversation. But there's more of an emotional element to this one. I think people I've talked to have mixed feelings on it. I've been actually very surprised. Some people I talk to, I'm like, wow, I never would have thought you'd be in favor of this. Other people I talk to, I'm like, I'm really surprised you're against this. So this one's a hard one for me to really take a pulse on the community. And I don't know, I prefer more information.
Is it advisory then? Or maybe that's a question I have.
Well, I think the way you would interpret it is, let's say it is advisory. We don't have to follow it. I mean, let's say the vote is 55-45. Then you're sort of like, okay, the community is sort of split on this. Exercise your judgment. If it's 80-20, one way or the other, you're getting a really loud message. And to Trustee Plunkett's point of view, if this is a presidential election, so we'll probably have 15,000 people vote. Like, you'll get a pretty clear message from the community, potentially. And if it's not clear, well, then the board is going to exercise its judgment, I think.
And do we believe those 15,000 people, I'm just asking the question, this is why I'm torn. Do we believe that those 15,000 people are going to have the knowledge of the positives and negatives of this particular rep? Because there are positives and negatives. Yes, it's a moral issue, but there are some, if we don't do it, it's a loss of revenue, and that could be fixing a road for somebody per year.
Well, Trustee Dodd's question goes to a question that I raised earlier to the staff, which is to try to understand what information and how will be provided to the public so that they have at least the level of understanding that we have, tax ramifications and locations and all the like that goes into this. And I know that Mike spoke to it briefly to me, and I guess I would ask him to maybe speak to all of us about the process of bringing all of this information before the public, before the vote.
Yeah, mute Mike.
Make sure I was unmuting. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. And we've already reached out to Metro Strategies to start thinking through what our plan is going to be in terms of communication. We can't advocate for or against the referendum using taxpayer dollars. We can simply provide factual information, but we certainly need to in this instance. So we'll have a dedicated web page for this. Our communicator will be going out in advance of the election, and there will be a dedicated page in that issue relative to this, as well as our social media and our e-news. And when we come back to the board on July 28th, we can lay out a timeline as to when this information will drop and some examples of the type of education that we will be putting forth, so that we can make sure that the community is as informed as they can be when they head to the polls in November.
Mike, if you were to do that, can you also put together then a cost of what it will cost us to have Metro Strategies put this in place for us and put our website, because that would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
And, oh, sorry about that. So since this information is, coming in, I mean, there were a lot of towns that just did not have enough information to give us already, in Mr. Stein's report, since this is so new, and then we had the pandemic. So I would just ask that, we're constantly updating and being in touch with other towns and finding out what's going on. If we decide to do this referendum, between now and November, any new news gets out there, any town's decisions, any impacts, either positive or negative, we find out about.
Absolutely.
Trustee Kurzman, you haven't. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Kennedy, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. If I could just go back to what Kathy said, I don't think that we are uncertain about the moral issue. If 67% of the residents voted in favor of having it somewhere in the state, it clearly doesn't bother them from a moral point of view. I don't think that the majority of, if that referendum back in November was correct, there's not a moral issue anymore with 67% of the village. There is, though, a question whether you want it in your backyard. And it seems to me when I talk to people, the only thing they really want to talk about is where we would put it and how would it affect the village itself. And so that's going to be a little bit harder, I think, to address in a referendum. I'm not saying we can't do it, but I think that that's the question that we really need answered, not whether we think that there's a moral objection to it. I think that's been answered. But whether we definitely want it here as opposed to somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, the reality is that's up to a future village board to decide, because we can set the zoning code for, like, this is where it's going to be for now, and then a future village board, somebody comes in and says, hey, I got this great location, you currently don't allow it, will you allow it? Then they could say yes. So.
Well, yes, but if we say no, you can't open one. That takes care of the issue.
Well, they could also turn that around too. It's later.
Nothing is permanent.
So, Trustee Kurzman, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. So, I would, if you have thoughts on this, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm okay with the referendum. I do think the biggest fork in the road we've already passed, and that was by creating the moratorium, giving an opportunity to the likes of Skokie, which, as you pointed out, is going to be perhaps the biggest in the state, and it is 0.7 miles away from my home. So to some degree, I think the market will sort of dictate things, and I think maybe we're consistent with that by doing the referendum to see what the people across the village think, and then, but then there'll be another hurdle to pass, and that is whether there will be a bona fide opportunity in our village, especially if we were to sort of narrow its potential locations. So, I think a lot of things have to go a certain way for it to be a significant moneymaker for us. So I do think the big fork in the road, we've already crossed it, and so I think a little more patience to wait for public input would be helpful. One of the questions I had from staff is, are we going to miss sort of the second wave of interest in new applications by waiting? And I think I appreciate staff's perspective that by waiting to November, no. But if we punt further, we are essentially checking out of it. So I'm sort of content to sort of let the market make the call, both our residents and the subsequent steps that would be necessary.
Okay, so that sounds like there's a consensus for moving ahead with a referendum. So let me move on to the question about the language, which, just for people's reference, it's on page 468 of 482 if you're looking at it in the PDF. Oh, okay.
I'll share my screen. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Stein or Mr. Brayman. I'm okay with the language. Are there suggested tweaks from any of the folks out there? Trustee Plunkett, Trustee Barrow, Trustee Kennedy, Trustee Kurzman, Trustee Dodd.
I like that it's straightforward and simple. I think it's readily understood. So, I think the simpler the better on this.
We don't want to create subparts and then subparts in some lawyer-esque sentence here. So, yes, it's straightforward. It's pretty clear. I think it does the trick.
Trustee Kurzman, Trustee Sullivan.
Looks good, right? Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments for the staff? I think the staff has its guidance for the July 28th meeting. Mr. Stein, Mr. Brayman?
Yes.
No, I think we got the direction, and we'll make sure that everything is on the next agenda.
Okay. So Trustee Plunkett, I think that was all for judiciary, correct?
Correct.
All right, so we'll move on to item 6.7, which is reports from special committees. There's no reports tonight. Item 7 is new business. There's no additional new business. Item 8 is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
That was Trustee Plunkett, I believe. Is there a second?
Second?
Trustee Kennedy with the second. The clerk, please call the roll on the motion to adjourn.
Trustee Sullivan.
Aye.
Trustee Barrow.
Aye.
Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Kurzman.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett.
Aye.
President Valinsky.
Aye. So the motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.